Oh boy, we are in big trouble.
And they are oblivious to the weather modification. In this case, we've had a 30-year-old cloud seeding project overhead. Nobody was informed about it. My board of supervisors, my county supervisors were not informed. Our local air pollution control district, lead was not informed. Everybody is just focused on the hot topic of the day, which is climate change and carbon capture. And they've completely lost sight of the fact that for decades we have been assaulted by heavy metals, and then what you wanted to talk about today, which is equally as important, adulticides, which are organophosphate pesticides that they are also spraying from aircraft. So that's something we can talk about. So but this cloud seeding pilot was not my first pilot confrontation. I started using Flight Radar about 5 years ago and getting familiar with, well, what's this plane? What's that plane? And then learning to identify commercial flights from military flights, from the private jet, the private jets, the corporate flight jets. And the things I found on this website was, I use Flight Radar 24. I know there are other platforms out there that people swear by. It was free. So I was self-taught. It was free. I was happy with what I had. And so that's what I navigate. In fact, you can let folks know I do have tutorials on how to use this app and how to look up registration numbers on my Substack. And I also have a lot of videos on BitChute where you can scroll through and see sort of a compilation of my many findings and learnings and musings, and sometimes my rants over the last
year. Okay. So everybody, her BitChute channel is going to be in my description.
Thank you.
On Rumble. I can't put it on Twitter because when you do an outgoing website on Twitter in the comments, the algorithm suppresses you because they don't want you leaving Twitter.
Got it.
Yeah. So you have to join my Rumble channel, which is Liberty Talk Canada, at Liberty Talk Canada, for you to get it. But I will put it on Facebook. And here is your substack.com/at Mellowcat. If you want to learn how to use the Flight Radar, you did a Zoom and people can watch that. Is it there?
Yes, it's there. It's called My First Zoom, and it's a tutorial on how to read the skies or something. And so that was, I had a kind of a smaller meeting. It was great because I didn't want to have too many people. I have a basic free Zoom account that I set up to do this, and I wanted to keep it short and sweet and simple. And then I made that available to everybody that's on the channel so that they can see the steps that I take and how to identify. It's a powerful tool. I mean, I've learned about insect drops. In fact, in Canada, I called one of your departments because they're dropping rabies vaccine packets for wildlife.
What do you mean? What do you mean dropping?
Okay, so in the United States and also in Canada, I'm going to send you the information. I was not prepared to talk about this, but I have to tell you this.
Okay.
Let me state my belief first, because of all the years of researching, connecting the dots, looking at the patterns, following the money. I truly believe that what's happening is we are being poisoned. Nature and insects, beneficial insects like bees and butterflies, are being poisoned because you see there is a whole new market for the CRISPR engineered insects and plants and seeds that these corporations and billionaire investors can make a profit with. So they don't care about life. They can kill it off and sell us their CRISPR or genetically modified CRISPR engineered replacements. That is what's happening. And when they do these rabies vaccine drops, my belief now is that what they're doing is they're actually poisoning our wildlife, which then they say, oh, the deer are sick or these animals are sick. And so now everyone has to have a mandatory rabies vaccine for their pets. We're going to start vaccinating the wild deer. We're going to start vaccinating the wildlife. They were just testing a bald eagle for bird flu. Okay, it is such a scam. And if they can't get those bioweapon injections into our arms, you better believe our government's going to pay billions upon billions of dollars, like they're doing right now. They're paying $5 billion, the NIH, to study and create an aerosolized COVID vaccine.
That's right. I covered it in my show, and DARPA is involved.
Yes, always DARPA.
DARPA is involved.
Always DARPA.
Our government, people have written to our government and all they ever say is, it's above my pay grade. This is federal. And then the federal is like, this is military. And, we have Navy here from your country in America that have set up shop in Chilliwack or Abbotsford,
Oh.
and we're not allowed to know why they're there and what they're doing.
Keep your eyes on them. I'm sorry. You
Yeah.
have different pockets of the US Air Force and the Navy that I believe are also involved in some of the solar radiation management that's happening and all sorts of nefarious affairs. In fact,
HARP.
I spoke to a former service member. I want to make this clear. Not everyone that signs up to be in the service is an evil person, but you have a lot of players at the top that are psychopaths. They are recruited because they're psychopaths and they don't care, and they will do anything to get their agenda out there, and they could also compartmentalize a lot of things. And people go through this process of brainwashing. You break them down in trainings and you build them back up to be the obedient, subservient servant. Same thing with medical school for doctors. You put them through the residency, you wear them out, you break them down, you wear them down, then you train them up in the Rockefeller medicine, with the Rockefeller medicine, and then out they go, educated with their certificates on the door, on their walls, but then they're also just as indoctrinated as anyone else that's gone through these sorts of breakdowns and trainings.
Okay, so before we get into this adulticide nerve agent and what he said about it being a nerve agent, I just want to remind my viewers who didn't know, you also collected samples of rainwater. Is that correct, over in your property?
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay.
So
What
I
did
was
you find?
inspired. Tell me again.
What did you find?
Okay. I found aluminum, barium, chromium, copper, nickel, strontium, titanium, vanadium, and zinc. The higher amounts, so the aluminum was high. The surprising amount, it was the titanium that really threw me for a loop, And so I started to investigate, like, where does titanium come from in the atmosphere? Come to find out, the United Arab Emirates has been using titanium dioxide nanoparticles for their seeding efforts. And they're also doing experiments in the United States. So my thought is perhaps this is part of the experimental manipulation, and they're using titanium dioxide nanoparticles. Now, if you look up that phrase and you look into health effects from inhalation or ingestion, none of it's good. In fact, there was a Blue Cross Blue Shield. These are major insurance providers out here in the US. They said that there's, in 2020, a rise in early onset dementia and Alzheimer's for 30 and 40-year-olds. And you have to wonder, now I know there's a lot of aluminum in all the injections given to children and adults, but then you have to also wonder, you're getting it from the environment. And when you look at the amounts of aluminum in my rain samples, you have to realize, oh, I'm breathing in these particles. I'm drinking these particles because they're falling into our water, So, and the agencies are not looking out for you. They're not doing these tests. They are, again, so focused on carbon capture and storage and, net zero goals that they've lost their way. So it really is on us to do our own investigation and to be the journalists, frankly, because even I've reached out to my local newspapers in the county. They are so disinterested. They have, they're short-staffed, underpaid, and they just have to retell the stories that they get handed down for the most part. Nobody is doing investigative journalism anymore except people like you and me, because we're curious and we're willing to put it out there. And so it really does come down to the people becoming their own journalists and advocates for their own health.
And it certainly isn't just you that has found these toxic chemicals in rainwater and snow, etc. It's all over the world. People are putting videos out of this and they're sending them to labs. It's not just like somebody who is a chef trying to have a microscope and act like they know what they're doing. It isn't just that. It's being sent to labs, just like this farmer sent his corn to a lab, just so that people wouldn't think he's a freak. And the journalists, so-called journalists, the propaganda MSM,
yes,
they're too scared of being made fun of. That's
Which is a shame. That's not journalism. That's not even, you're not courageous. That's not journalism. Stop supporting your local papers if they can't write about real articles, is my opinion. Start supporting those who put out Substacks or have platforms where they're actually sharing real news. Kudos to that farmer for taking those tests. The more people that are doing this, the more data you have. In fact, something else that fell from the upper atmosphere in this area were these long strands of what spider silk is what. So yes, what happened was
I covered it.
Well, when these first fell, we had park directors and regional park managers. They didn't know what it was. They said, we don't know what the strange substance is. And I cover this in some of my videos, and I have the screenshot of the article where they don't know what it is. Well, then the following day, there was some entomologist that said, well, I theorize that it's likely that it's from spiders ballooning. And that's what everyone went with that. And so people stopped looking. They're like, oh, it's just spiders ballooning. And I said, yeah, 30-foot long strands with no baby spiders and no eggs. I mean, I still have some sample in a bag here. There are no eggs hatching. There's nothing that was being transported, right? So I ended up collecting samples because I'm curious again about everything. And I sent them off to a friend who does look under a microscope. Now, not an entomologist, but we were comparing like real spider web to these fibers. And even my husband, who's a skeptic sometimes, touched and felt some of my sample, and he said, this is not from spiders. And he theorized it was maybe from trees. But then when I showed him my videos of it falling from as high as we're in the mountains, okay, and this is falling from way up high, he said, oh, that's not from trees either. I think he's like, well, maybe it's from rockets. Well, then there's that investigative team. You heard about them out in Switzerland or Europe. And
that's who I showed, was those.
You want to definitely look at their work, because now they're saying that, well, it's manufactured, it's synthetic, and that it appears to be a delivery mechanism. So, and by the way, this is nothing new when it comes to military. And now you've got public sector, private sector coming together, right? And they've got all these ideas. And again, you have to start investigating. I really wish that people would retain their sense of curiosity, because, and also there's so much happening in our own backyards that you don't really have to go that far, to find something. It's all around us. It's coming from the top down. Everyone down to the county, local level is being impacted by the aerial assault, the spider silk, the adulticide spray, and the vaccine packets, the rabies drops that they're putting out in nature. It's really wild, isn't it? But again, when you cause a problem, and then you offer your fraudulent diagnostic tests, when you follow the money there, that went back to USAID. That also went back to the Clinton Health Access Initiative. That also there's all these players are involved with these companies that are making the profit for the fraudulent tests that tell you have the disease of the day. Okay. And then DARPA and BARDA are funding Moderna to develop the next pipeline mRNA crap to put in your arm. So it's a big scam. Living in this web of